That fall evening was chilly when I first noticed something wasn't right in my marriage. The wind was rustling those orange-brown leaves outside our window, and I had this weird feeling in my gut I couldn't shake. My wife Claire told me she was hanging out with her friends, so I stayed home alone with some wine and an old flick to kill time. I remember pouring myself a generous glass of that Cabernet she hated but I loved, settling into our worn leather couch that had shaped itself to my body over the years. After 7 years of marriage, you really get to know someone's patterns and little giveaways. The way they laugh when they're genuinely happy versus when they're just being polite. How their eyes crinkle differently depending on whether they're telling the truth or not. Claire and I had our own language of sorts, little signals and habits we both recognized without saying a word. Something felt off that night. When she called to check in, her voice seemed too cheerful and her laugh sounded forced, like she was putting on a performance. There was this hollowness to it that sent a chill down my spine. I tried not to read too much into it though. Don't be that guy, I kept telling myself as I stared at the TV screen without really watching whatever was playing. Don't be the jealous, suspicious husband. Just after midnight, I heard her key in the lock, and she came home acting like a teenager who'd snuck out. Her face was all flushed, hair kinda messy in a way that wasn't just from the wind, and I couldn't help but notice she smelled like some other guy's cologne, musky and unfamiliar, definitely not something I owned. My gut twisted into knots, but I faked a smile like everything was fine. 7 years of marriage teaches you how to wear masks when needed. Claire just plopped down on the couch, kicked her shoes off with this exaggerated sigh of relief, and gave me this carefree smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I noticed a small red mark on her neck that she quickly adjusted her collar to cover. "You're in a pretty good mood," I said as I put my glass down, trying to keep my voice steady even though my hand wanted to shake. "Yeah, had an awesome night," she answered, her voice unusually high and excited, almost like she was overcompensating. "The girls and I had such a blast. Nothing wild, just drinks and good times at that new place downtown, you know, the one with the fancy cocktails I told you about last week." I just nodded while I watched her closely, noticing how she wouldn't meet my eyes for more than a second. "Glad you enjoyed yourself. Did Sarah ever show up? I know you mentioned she might be late." Sarah was her best friend, and I threw the question out as bait, curious what she'd say. "Oh, yeah, she got there eventually," Claire replied too quickly, then immediately changed the subject. "God, I'm starving. Did you eat all the leftovers?" As the night went on, I noticed she wouldn't look me in the eye and kept clutching her phone like it was a lifeline, angling the screen away whenever a notification came through. I started getting suspicious but kept quiet, my thoughts racing a million miles an hour. I'm not one for confrontations, at least not right away. Never have been. In high school, I was the kid who'd smile even when I was being pushed around, plotting my revenge for later instead of fighting back immediately. I figured I'd wait and see what happened. After all, I always thought trust was what our marriage was built on. Isn't that what everyone says? Without trust, you've got nothing. Well, I was starting to think I might have nothing. The next morning, Claire was weirdly happy, humming some tune I didn't recognize while making breakfast. The scent of bacon and coffee filled our kitchen, but it couldn't mask the stench of deception that hung in the air, at least to me. Her phone kept buzzing on the counter, but she ignored it in a way that seemed calculated, too casual. When she left the room to take a shower, I couldn't help myself. My heart racing so loud I could hear it in my ears, I grabbed her phone and unlocked it. We knew each other's passwords, one of those little trust things that now felt like some sick joke, a mockery of everything I thought we had. What I saw crushed me, like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart until it burst. Messages from someone saved only as them saying stuff like "last night was amazing" and "I can still feel your touch." My eyes blurred as I scrolled through all the texts, each one another nail in the coffin of our marriage. There were even photos from some dim hotel room with fancy wallpaper I recognized from a place downtown, Claire laughing with a drink, her head thrown back, draped over some guy I'd never seen before. He was tall, dark-haired, with this smug smile that made me want to punch through my phone screen. Everything I thought I knew fell apart in that moment. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow that knocked the wind out of me. I had to sit down at our kitchen table, the same one where we'd shared thousands of meals, made plans for our future, played stupid board games on rainy Sundays. I put the phone back exactly where I found it and forced myself to stay calm, taking deep breaths like my therapist had taught me years ago for my anxiety. The anger would come later. Right then I needed to think clearly, to be smart about this. Claire came back to the kitchen with her hair wrapped in a towel, no idea what I'd discovered. She kissed my cheek, leaving a damp spot from her wet hair, and handed me some eggs, smiling as bright as ever. I could smell her shampoo, the same vanilla scent I'd bought her for Christmas. How could she act so normal after what she'd done? How many times had she come home to me, kissed me with the same lips that had been on him just hours before? "You okay, babe? You look a little pale," she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Just tired," I lied, surprising myself with how easy it was. "Didn't sleep great." Over the next few days, I became like a ghost in my own house, watching, listening, figuring out just how deep her lies went. I started noticing patterns I'd been blind to before. The late nights at work that coincided with her dressing nicer than usual. The mysterious errands that took hours longer than they should have. The way she'd take her phone into the bathroom when she showered. What I thought was maybe a one-night mistake was actually much worse. Claire and this guy had been meeting up for months, stealing time I thought she was spending elsewhere. I found hotel receipts, intimate messages dating back nearly 6 months, even plans for a weekend away disguised as a girls' trip coming up next month. Anger boiled just under my skin, making me feel like I might explode any minute, but I didn't confront her yet. There was something eerily calming about having a secret of my own now. Instead, I focused on collecting evidence, saving texts, taking screenshots, photographing photos, even pocketing receipts she carelessly left in her purse. I started forming a plan, and felt a grim satisfaction as I did, like a judge preparing a sentence. On the surface, I stayed the same loving husband we both pretended I was. I cooked her favorite dinners, that pasta with the creamy sauce she loved, grilled salmon on Thursdays, laughed at her jokes even when they weren't funny, and even planned a weekend getaway for just the two of us. I made reservations at places I knew she'd love, bought her favorite wine to bring along, even got her a new dress just because. Claire seemed relieved, like my attention somehow made her feel less guilty about screwing around behind my back. Little did she know I was setting the stage for her downfall, each kind gesture another piece of my elaborate trap. That weekend trip was my masterpiece. I booked this secluded cabin in the mountains, real picture-perfect spot with a view that would take your breath away, no neighbors for miles, just trees and silence and a crystal-clear lake nearby. Claire was super excited, going on about how much she needed to get away, how good it would be for us to reconnect. The irony wasn't lost on me. "We need this time together," she said as she packed her new dress, the one I'd watched her try on and twirl in front of the mirror. "Just you and me, like the old days." I nodded and smiled, playing my part perfectly. I packed our bags, making sure everything was perfect, planning each moment meticulously. I even brought along equipment for my new hobby, including a hammer, some rope, and other tools that might come in handy for what I had in mind. As we drove up that winding mountain road, Claire's hand resting casually on my thigh like she hadn't betrayed everything we built together, I felt strangely calm. The time for rage had passed. Now was the time for justice. She didn't even question why I brought the hammer and other stuff along. Our first night at the cabin was picture perfect, at least on the surface. We sipped wine by the crackling fire, talked about when we first met, and even slow danced under a sky full of stars. But my head wasn't really there. I was running through each step of what was coming next, like a chess player thinking 5 moves ahead. When morning came, I told Claire she should sleep in while I went to take some photos of the scenery. She just smiled sleepily and burrowed deeper under the blankets, mumbling something about how thoughtful I was. As soon as she drifted back to sleep, I grabbed my gear and headed out, but I wasn't interested in landscape photography. Instead, I carefully set up several small cameras throughout our cabin, positioning them strategically to capture everything I needed. When Claire finally dragged herself out of bed around 11, I suggested we go hiking. Found this amazing spot not too far from here, I told her, watching her face for any hesitation. The view is incredible. She seemed reluctant at first, probably wanting to check her phone instead, but eventually nodded. Sure, let me just get dressed. We spent hours wandering those mountain trails, and there were moments, brief flashes really, when I almost forgot what she'd done. Almost. The crisp air, the rustling leaves, her hand occasionally brushing against mine, it was like stepping into a photograph of what our marriage used to be. Back at the cabin, Claire's phone started buzzing like crazy. She glanced at it with this annoyed look, then quickly turned it face down. Work stuff, she muttered, dismissing the notifications with a wave of her hand. Someone messed up a client presentation. I just nodded, knowing damn well it wasn't work. That evening, I cooked her favorite meal, grilled salmon with that lemon butter sauce she loves, and made sure her wineglass never got below half empty. With each glass, she became more relaxed, laughing at my jokes, touching my arm when she spoke, completely clueless about what was coming. When she excused herself to use the bathroom, I moved fast. I grabbed her phone from the counter, unlocked it, and sent a single text to them, "Let's end this." Then I deleted the entire thread, making sure to leave no trace before putting it back exactly where she'd left it. By the time we returned home Sunday night, Claire seemed like her old self again, laughing at something on TV, talking about plans for the week ahead. But when she reached for her purse to get her lip balm, her entire body went rigid. I watched as she frantically dug through it, dumping the contents onto the coffee table, her panic growing by the second. "Where is it?" she muttered, her voice shaking as she searched. "What's wrong?" I asked, putting on my best concerned husband face. "My wedding ring," she whispered, tears forming in her eyes. "I can't find my wedding ring." "Oh no," I said, letting fake sympathy drip from every word. "When's the last time you remember having it?" She looked at me, her expression this perfect mix of guilt and desperation. "I don't know. I must have taken it off somewhere." Of course, I'd hidden it myself, pocketed it while she was sleeping at the cabin. That ring, which was supposed to symbolize our commitment, had become just another piece in my elaborate payback plan. The next day, while Claire was in the shower, I set the final phase of my plan into motion. I'd spent weeks preparing this file, meticulous, organized, with every scrap of evidence laid out in chronological order. Text messages, photos, hotel receipts, location data, even screenshots of her search history. I placed it on the kitchen table, right next to her coffee mug, and waited. When she found it, all the color drained from her face. I watched from the doorway as she flipped through the pages, her hands trembling more with each turn. "What is this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The truth," I replied flatly. "Something you've been hiding from me for months." She started stammering, trying to explain herself, reaching for excuses about how unhappy she'd been, how it didn't mean anything, how she was going to end it. I held up my hand, cutting her off mid-sentence. "I don't want your excuses, Claire. I want you to leave." Her eyes widened, tears streaming down her face now. "Please," she begged, "we can work through this. I'll do anything. I'll go to counseling. I'll quit my job. Please." "It's too late," I said, keeping my voice cold and steady. "You made your choice, and now I'm making mine." What Claire didn't know was that I'd already consulted with one of the best divorce attorneys in the state. With the evidence I gathered, proof of her infidelity, her lies, the money she'd spent on hotel rooms, the divorce would be swift and heavily in my favor. I'd get the house, the car, and most of our savings. She hadn't seen it coming, not even a little bit. As she packed her bags, sobbing the whole time, I felt no remorse. None. She had destroyed our marriage, shattered the trust we'd built over 7 years. This wasn't revenge, this was justice. In the weeks that followed, I started rebuilding my life piece by piece. I joined a gym, reconnected with old friends, even started dating again, casually, nothing serious. Claire, on the other hand, fell apart. M, whose name I learned was Mark, some hotshot from her office, had completely ghosted her after getting that text I sent. Without him or me to lean on, she had to face the consequences of her actions alone. Friends we'd shared for years distanced themselves from her once they heard what happened. Most sided with me, offering support, inviting me to dinners and events. Claire lost not just her marriage, but her entire social circle. One evening, about 3 months after everything went down, I sat on the porch of what was now officially my house, sipping a glass of good whiskey and watching the sunset. The pain was still there, a dull ache that flared up sometimes when I least expected it. But alongside it was something else, a sense of triumph. I'd refused to be a victim. I'd taken back control. The memory of Claire's laughter no longer haunted me. Instead, I found myself smiling, sometimes even laughing out loud at nothing in particular. It was a different kind of laughter than before, deeper, maybe a little darker, but genuine. The kind that comes from surviving something that should have broken you, but didn't. As I raised my glass to the setting sun, I savored not just the whiskey, but the bittersweet taste of revenge served exactly how I'd planned it, methodically, patiently, and ice cold.